Well, hello again, everyone. I am your host, once again, Michael Hingson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're with us wherever you happen to be in the world and wherever we happen to be talking in the world. And today we're actually talking to Dr. Khwaja Moinuddin from India. So it's a long distance. Boy, signals travel a lot faster today than they did when we used covered wagons or pony expresses. So I'm really grateful for the fact that we get to use Zoom and computers and do things in such a meaningful way. So anyway, here we are. Khwaja has written two books, and I know he's going to tell us about those, so I'm not going to give a lot of that away. He has been a transformational leader. He also has a background in mechanical engineering, and that fascinates me because it seems to me it's interesting going from mechanical engineering to being a transformational subject matter expert and expert by any standard. So I'm going to be curious to hear about that. But anyway, meanwhile, Khwaja, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael. It's indeed an honor to be on your podcast, and as we have been discussing, I'm no expert by any means. I have just gathered years and years of experience, 22 plus years of experience, and I'm still learning. And continuous improvement, transformation. It's an ocean. So the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know much.
Yeah, the
So,
more you
but
learn, the
it's a
more there
pleasure.
is to learn.
Yes, there is to learn. Yes.
Well, I know exactly what you're saying. I think if we stop learning, then we have really let ourselves down and let the world down. We need to continue to learn. And I very much enjoy doing
Yeah.
these podcasts because I get to learn so much from so many people. It's really a lot of fun. So I want to, again, thank you for being here and looking forward to all that we get to talk about today. So let's get to it. I'd like to learn a little bit about maybe the early Khwaja growing up and so on. Tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about you growing up in India and so on.
Yep. I'm from a very small town in Pondicherry, called Pondicherry in India. The closest big city is Chennai. It's about 160 kilometers south of Chennai. It used to be a former French colony. Now the place has been changed. I mean, the name has been changed from Pondicherry to Puducherry. But growing up, I'm the youngest of two kids. I have a brother. He's 4 years older than me. And my parents were typical middle class, lower middle class, both working parents. They worked really, really hard to put me and my brother through to school. They took care of us. They protected us. So I'm really grateful for my parents, my mom, my dad, and my brother also, who took care of me. When I was young. So I'm really grateful to my family because we were just the four of us in our family growing up. I went to a public school. Initially, I went to a private school, but then my parents couldn't afford the fees, so we moved to public school. And I did all my schooling and my bachelor's in mechanical engineering in Pondicherry. So born and brought up in Pondicherry, which was a small fishing village. Didn't know much about the real world until I graduated and stepped out of India for the very first time to go to the US to do my master's degree. My childhood was normal. On a living on a coast, so I really enjoyed living near the beach. We didn't live very far away from the beach, just maybe 100, 200 meters away from the beach. um, Growing up, I had a lot of friends, so we would take our bicycles and ride all over the town because it wasn't as crazy as it is now with all the traffic and stuff. It was less congested, and the good thing about Pondicherry, an interesting fact, is because it was designed by the French. all the streets in Pondicherry are at right angles to each other.
Hmm.
So you would never get lost if you are in Pondicherry,
Right.
in the middle of the Pondicherry, because wherever you go, if you take a right turn and another right turn and another right turn, you will end up at the same place. So you will never get lost. That's an interesting fact in Pondicherry about Pondicherry.
So it certainly is a whole lot easier to travel around Pondicherry than it is to travel around Washington, D.C. by any standard.
I think so. Yes.
There's a lot of angular streets and streets that go in different directions in Washington. So, yeah, I think I'd like Pondicherry. That's pretty good. So, did you learn to fish?
Yes. Um, not yeah. I mean, I did learn how to fish, but more swimming.
Yeah.
Used to go to the ocean almost every day. You know, I think I practically spent a lot of time on the beach with my friends and in the playgrounds. Our playgrounds used to be huge growing up, unlike now.
Yeah.
They have become so small and condensed with all the development, the real estate that's growing in India, in Pondicherry, and in India in general. But yeah, I did learn how to fish. Not using like a fishing rod in the US, but using the fishing the thread,
The
the
nets,
nylon wire.
fishing
Yeah,
nets. Yeah.
not the net, but the wire,
But the
just
wires.
the
Okay.
single wire. Yes,
Got it. Well, so
yes.
you, what got you into mechanical engineering?
Well, as all of my fellow Indians would say, in India, you are either an engineer or a doctor first. So, so I really had no choice. I had to become an engineer or a doctor. I didn't score enough to become a doctor, so I naturally became an engineer.
Uh-huh.
But uh, since I have to become an engineer, I was looking at all the different fields of engineering. What fascinated me was the field of mechanical engineering, because I heard from several of my friends and colleagues that mechanical engineering is an evergreen field, and typically mechanical engineers can fit anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really they were 100% correct. And I'm glad I chose mechanical engineering, and I really liked my subject, because that what I am today would not be if I hadn't learned about mechanical engineering.
Mm-hmm. Well, so
Mhm.
you got your bachelor's degree, but then
Yep.
you, as you said, you stepped out and you actually came to the United States and went to Texas Tech to do your advanced degree.
Mhm.
What made you do that? That's moving a long way from home.
Yep. So some of my friends and my seniors also, when I was doing my mechanical engineering, they were talking about something called as a GRE or a TOEFL. It sounded Greek, like Greek and Latin to me. I didn't know what it was. I had no intention of going to the US initially. My intention was to get a job and earn a lot of money. And I was almost done studying at that point of time, learning subjects like thermodynamics and a lot of advanced mechanical engineering stuff for 4 years really wears you out.
Right.
But my seniors and my cousin also, and my uncles and a lot of my relatives, they said, if you don't do your masters now, and if you go straight away to work, you may not have the inclination to learn more. So they really prompted me or nudged me to do my masters also. And my mom, of course, she has been a great driving force behind me. She encouraged me to always learn. She herself has so many degrees. I don't even know how many degrees she has. She has master's degrees and bachelor's degrees in all sorts of areas. And to this day, she keeps learning, and she has been a teacher for about 45 years now.
Hmm.
So my mom, along with my relatives and my friends, they said, you need to study more. So I had actually got a job, in my fourth year, and I got a job through on-campus interviews, like a career fair in the US, similar to a career
Right.
fair in the US. So I gave up that job and I wrote GRE and TOEFL. I worked hard. Got I did not get like flying colors, but I got good grades in GRE and TOEFL, and then I applied to universities. Initially, I was going to be an aerospace engineer, um, but then my friends also told me that maybe that's a difficult field to get a job in future because it requires US security clearance and stuff. So you're better off doing something which is related to mechanical engineering or even mechanical engineering. I didn't want to go too much into technical stuff, so I explored industrial engineering, and I found the courses and all that stuff were really to my liking and to my interest. So then I chose industrial engineering and Texas Tech specifically because of the industrial engineering program they had. So then and that's one thing led to another, and then I landed in Texas Tech University.
Well, that must have been fun. So you had lots of new experiences. You learned about football and all sorts of other things
Yep.
in addition to your academic studies.
Yes. Yes. Red Raiders. Go Red Raiders.
Yeah, right. Well, and I went to UC Irvine. I don't know. I still don't know if we have a much of a football team today. We have a good basketball team, but go anteaters anyway. So it is interesting how our lives change and how we end up how God gives us different opportunities, and then of course the issue really is us taking those opportunities and moving forward with them. When you certainly did, you stepped out and you moved to the United States. You went to Texas Tech. You got your bachelor's, and where did you get your PhD?
So I got my master's from Texas Tech, and I also started to do my PhD in industrial engineering in Texas Tech. But unfortunately, I didn't finish because the department ran out of funding, and I had to search for a job. So I got my job in 3M as an industrial engineer,
Okay.
but I also did an internship in another company called Rhodia, which is a chemicals manufacturing company. But then, while I was, still pursuing my full-time job, I really wanted to go back to Texas Tech and complete my PhD because I had completed all my coursework except
Hmm.
for the thesis, which was the dissertation, which was pending. Um, and at that time, one of the professors told me, Khwaja, try and complete your PhD, otherwise you will regret it. I still remember his words to this day. I should have, looking back, I should have stayed back in Texas Tech and finished my PhD. I should have, borrowed some more money and finished my PhD in industrial engineering in Texas Tech. But nevertheless, what I did is I did my doctorate, professional doctorate in management studies in Indian School of Business Management.
Ah,
Um, so slightly different, but I didn't actually want to go for an MBA. So I did the doctorate in management studies because I was more interested in organizational behavior, operations management in that field. So I got it in 2012.
wow. So you did complete it, even though again it went in a slightly different direction. But what was your interest that took you into a little bit more of a business oriented environment? Because you had clearly been in mechanical engineering and in that discipline for most of your studies.
Yes, yes. So, when I was doing my master's degree in industrial engineering, um, you know, uh, and I got interested in continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, transformation, change management in that field more as I was doing my
Mm,
master's in industrial engineering. And then when I got my first job in 3M. 3M is a great company, as you know.
yes.
I learned all the basics of my Lean Six Sigma, change management, hands-on in 3M. And I'm still grateful to this day that my very first job was in 3M. Actually, it's a funny story because, I got the job in 3M on the same day I was interviewed. I was very lucky. I think the line manager really liked me, and he said, Khwaja, I'm going to hire you on the spot. So I was really, really, ecstatic on that day. And I still remember that feeling
Yeah.
to this day. Yes. What interested me, to coming back to your question, was when I was working in 3M, they have a good mentorship program. So they asked me, how do you want your career to be? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? How do you see yourself growing? And I said, I want to grow in the technical field. I want to become like a subject matter expert in Lean Six Sigma, black belt, master black belt, and I want to grow in the technical field. And I remember the mentor, she told me, Khwaja, while that's a good thought, but you will not grow much if you are purely technical. You
Hmm.
will grow more if you combine your technical expertise with management. How to lead people, how to manage people, how to do change management with people. So she actually, planted the seed in me to do more of people management role, and for that she prompted me to do more courses in people management, leading teams, how to work and collaborate with cross functional teams, and that interested me. And I started to search for courses that would give me that exposure, and then given the fact that also I took some courses in my master's, or when I was doing my PhD in industrial engineering, it prompted me more to move away from technical rather than getting a PhD in industrial engineering to do a doctorate in management studies. And hence I, slightly moved into the people management, operations management, into the softer stuff of managing people and getting stuff done through people, through others.
Well,
Mhm,
nothing wrong with that. I know my background was in physics,
mhm,
but along the way, there came a time that I was confronted with um, an opportunity to take a job that wasn't directly related to physics, and I chose to do it.
mhm,
But out of that,
mhm,
I ended up being put in a situation once where I had to make a choice to either go find a new job or change from doing kind of human factors studies and other things related to a product and going in instead
uh-huh,
into sales. And I chose to go into
mhm,
sales, but my reasoning was it's difficult enough for blind people to get jobs. Finding a new job
mhm,
would be really a challenge, whereas an opportunity was being offered. And it was a good opportunity, so I accepted it. So, again, I know that many times we do find that there is an opportunity that comes along that maybe we don't expect. And if we take it, it's the
mhm,
right way to go.
mhm. Yes, indeed.
So,
And your story has been fascinating, Michael. To be honest with you, it has been, it's very inspirational. Your story. Me and my wife, we were sharing, how you overcame adversity. That's really, really, really inspirational.
well, thank you, and I appreciate that. And to me, it's just how we live life, and we
Hmm.
sometimes we're presented with challenges, and we have to deal with those challenges, which is of course our role. And if we don't,
Hmm.
then we're the losers for doing it. Well, in your case, did you ever have
Hmm.
a defining moment or a situation where, if since we call this unstoppable mindset, where that kind of a
Hmm.
mindset really affected you and helped you through it?
Yeah, I mean, many situations. There's never a dull day in continuous improvement. So
Yeah.
it's full of challenges. Always, in every organization I have worked for, there have been challenges in terms of, how to deploy continuous improvement, how to take people with you in the journey of continuous improvement. But one of the things, early on when I was doing my master's degree is, you know I think that laid the foundation also for me to become more resilient and more adaptable. When my department said they didn't have funding, I wanted to, and this was, when I was doing my master's degree, not when I went into my PhD. When I was doing my master's degree, after a semester, they said they didn't have enough funding. So a lot of my colleagues, those who are in engineering, whether mechanical or industrial or chemical or petroleum engineering, they were searching for jobs. I think it was the summer of 2001. Um, and since it was summer, a lot of professors were on vacation, and I went door to door, knocking on every professor's office door, and almost everybody kind of either shooed me away or said we don't have funding, or their doors were closed because they were on vacation. So one of the things I did, I was very, very frustrated. I couldn't sleep. So I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing wrong here? Why am I not getting the funding? Why am I not getting a research assistantship? So as I was laying on my bed that night, one evening, I thought to myself, and an idea came to me. Why don't I go into Texas Tech University's Health Sciences Center, which is slightly far away. We have to walk like at least half an hour to get to the Texas Tech University's Health Sciences Center, and it's predominantly biology health sciences center. So none of my colleagues had gone there to look for a job. So I thought, why not go there? Maybe I will find some luck. So initially, I was told, no, you don't have a biology background, or, we don't have jobs
Mhm.
here. But on the third day, one professor, as I thought, my day on that day also is going to be a disappointment. Around 5 o'clock that evening, when I was about to go home, and I noticed one professor's door was open. His name is Brant Schneider. So if he's watching, I'm grateful to him also for this. Brant Schneider. He is the professor in oncology department in Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center. So I approached him. His door was open, and I told him, I'm searching for a job, any job. Would you be able to give me a job? He thought about it, and without hesitation, he said, "I do have a job, but you may not like it." And he said, it involves washing dishes, bakers. Are you comfortable in doing it? I said, I thought about it, and I said, I can do it if it helps me to get in-state tuition. And he also thought about it, and he said, yeah, I think that should not be a problem.
Mm.
And once I agreed to do that, then he said, I don't want you to just do that. I want to use your engineering skills to help me with research, doing some reports, research reports and analysis using your engineering skills. Would you be able to do that? I said, that's my specialty. I would be glad to do that. So, one thing led to another, and then he gave me the research assistantship, and I was able to continue with my master's degree without burdening my parents, because I had got a huge loan to go to the US. As
Yeah.
you know, going to the US during those times is not cheap. It's
Right.
very expensive. So I think that's what laid the foundation. So I thought, nothing is impossible. So if I can do that, I think I can convince people to do change management, use
Yeah.
my change management skills, and my Lean Six Sigma skills to do the continuous improvement in organizations. So I think that one moment, I think, was, when I got that, I didn't realize that, when I got back to my room and I told my friends that I had got this job, everybody's jaw dropped. They said, "You have done something impossible, Khwaja." So they said, we are now going to go to Health Sciences Center also. So I think a lot of our engineering guys went and knocked doors in Health Sciences Center, and they began to get jobs there.
Yeah. I remember once one of the first jobs my brother ever got. He was, I think, in high school. He had gotten to high school,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
he went to apply at a restaurant for a job just to earn some money.
mhm,
And the owner said, "Well, let me think about it. Would you go outside, and we have some weeds out in the area around the restaurant? Would you just pull the weeds?" And my brother
mhm,
said, "Sure, why not? I don't have anything else to do."
mhm,
So he went out, and like in a half hour, he had, excuse me, he had pulled all the weeds.
mhm,
The manager
mhm,
came out and was just absolutely amazed that he had done all of that. And he said, "Well, okay." And I thought about it, and I'll give you a job. And of
mhm,
course, he was really being tested, would he go out and do whatever he was asked to do, which he did
Hmm.
do. And when he came home and told my parents, and I was there at the time, about that, they said, "You understand that this guy was just testing you to see whether you would do whatever needed to be done to help the restaurant, and you passed, and he
Hmm.
got the job." We never know where things are going to come
Yep.
from,
Indeed.
and
Indeed. Yes.
we should be open and be willing to explore. It's always a good thing when we do that. I haven't thought
Yep.
about that in years, but you just reminded me of that story, and it's a great story. And for me, it was a lesson that you've got to do sometimes different things. And
Yep.
when you're really asking for someone's assistance, you also need to look at what they're asking you to do, and you need
Hmm.
to do what they're asking,
Hmm. Yes.
unless it's to
And
shoot
there's no
someone, and
such
that
job
doesn't
as
matter.
a
But
menial job. Yes.
no, I'm not going to
Yes.
go out and shoot someone, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Yes.
But well, that's great. Well, now while you were in the United States, you also
Hmm.
went off and got married, huh?
Yes, I did.
Well, that was a good thing. That's another good reason to have come to the U.S.
Yes.
Now, is your wife
Yes.
from India or the U.S.?
Well, it's an interesting story once again. We she's 2 years younger to me, and we met at a birthday party,
Ah,
um, and in at a professor's daughter's birthday party, and I initially thought I knew her from somewhere, so I was very shy to approach her, but then some of her friends, or I think some of my friends who knew her, they asked me if I would be okay to drop them to their house. So when I was driving, I looked at her through the rear view mirror,
yeah.
and I liked her a lot. So, but I didn't know whether she was looking at me at that time or not. But then later I told her that I was looking at you when I was driving. And then, one thing led to another, and, we dated. She's from India. So
Oh,
she was also doing her master's degree. At the time, I was doing an internship in a chemicals manufacturing company in Vernon, Texas, which is in the middle of nowhere, and I used to drive 3 hours from Vernon to Lubbock because I thought Lubbock was in the middle of nowhere. But then when I was working in Vernon, which is just like a small town of 10,000 people, uh, then when I used to drive back to Lubbock, it was like heaven, paradise. I could see many people in Lubbock. So when I was driving back and forth, and I met her in this party, and then we started to date, and then we got married in the US um, in 2000. We were dating for a very long time. We lived together also for a long time. We got to know each other, and then we got married in 2008.
ah. Well, that's
Mhm.
great. Congratulations. How long have you been married now?
Thank you. Well, we have known each other now for 21 years, since
Mm-hmm.
2004.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we have been married since 2008, so 17 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. And we have a son, 15 years old, and yeah, we are still, happily married to each other. And she has been a great support for me, not only in times of happiness, but especially, when I get frustrated, when I'm not in such a good mood, or when I feel dejected. She has supported me tremendously, and she is still supporting me tremendously.
But I bet that goes both ways.
Yes,
You have to be
she is
supportive
more
too.
stable.
She's
She's
more
more
stable than
stable than
you.
me. Yes,
Well,
I think she's
so
more emotionally mature also than
ah,
me. I don't want to tell her that, but she may know after this podcast.
well, so you do a lot of work in working with people involved in resistance and change and continuous improvement, and you deal with
Yeah,
people
yeah.
with resistance and
Hmm.
change. How do you
Hmm.
push back And how do you push beyond that? And how do you get people who are so resistive to change to agreeing to change? You know, the reason I ask is that we all
Hmm.
we all hear people talk all the time about how change is important, change is necessary,
Hmm.
but none of us really want to change. How do you deal with that?
Yep. Yes. So, over the years, this is what I have learned also. And I did my master's, my second master's in psychology, and that helped me a great deal also. I've always been, fascinated with the psychology of human behavior. So I always wondered, even when working in 3M or in my first company as an intern, I always wondered, why, even if a change is good, why are people resisting?
Mm-hmm.
And years passed by. I always thought that, we can always convince people with rational, logical stuff, with data. But then I found out, through trial and error, I don't get convinced using logic.
Mm-hmm.
I have my own ways to resist. So when I learned about how I am resisting, I thought that's natural than how other people would resist. Because, my girlfriend at that time, who is my wife now, when she used to suggest something, I would resist that. She would say, Khwaja, you're not organized. Let's get the house organized. And I would resist it because, getting organized is a good thing. But then I had my own way of doing stuff. So, to this day, I still resist, by the way. And she's still trying to convince me to get organized. But, I know why I resist. I know why I'm resisting. I know how I resist. So, that, early on helped me that, people resist because we are trying to change them. It's not the change, but we are trying to change them into something that they don't want to. So, for example, one of the line managers or one of the leaders in a company that I worked for, he was completely against continuous improvement. He was telling me, I have been doing continuous improvement, Kwaja, for 20 years. I don't need you to come and tell me how to do my job and how to improve it. And he was very open about it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so glad he was so open about it, because I have also seen people who resist very covertly. They would say yes in front of you and then go back and do
Right.
their own stuff, or they won't do anything at all. So I wanted to understand him, why he felt that way. And I went on plant walks with him, and he was very proud. When we were walking around the plant, he showed me all the improvements that he did. So I told him, Bill, his name is Bill, what you're doing is continuous improvement, Bill. So I'm not trying to tell you to do your job. I'm here to tell you how to, I'm here to help you how to do your job in a more structured way. And that's what CI is all about. So when I said that, immediately he said, Kwaja, I wish somebody, in your place had told me that earlier. Because people who came before you, they were all about tools and templates. And I hate to use tools and templates. I'm more of a practical guy. So then that was a learning for me also, that, that was an aha moment for me, that certain people have certain way of learning and certain people have certain way of improving, but we all want to improve. So if we guide people in the right direction and we talk their language, we use their frame of reference, we use their language, and we see what are their pain points, and we try to help them overcome those pain points, then people would naturally, we would get the buy-in for the change, and people would not resist so much. So at the end, what happened is Bill became a huge supporter of CI. Not only a huge supporter of CI, he passed my green belt exam also. I coached him and he passed my green belt exam, and he was very happy. Initially, he was reluctant to even attend my course, but then, after he went through the course, and then, after we built the rapport, and then I told him, I'm not trying to replace you, or I'm not trying to steal your job, or I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to help you. And continuous improvement is a more structured way of doing things, because you may be doing in trial and error. And by doing trial and error, you may be making some costly mistakes. But when we apply it in a structured way, we can avoid 99% of errors most of the time. So he really liked that approach. And he liked my approach of making things very, very practical, not speaking, in heavy technical terms, not using the jargon, and explaining it to him, in his own language. That's what helped, reduce the resistance. And over the years, what I have done is also, adapt my way of how I'm approaching resistance. One of the courses which I took, and it was a certification course also, was, instead of waiting for resistance to happen to you, we should approach resistance proactively. When we announce a change, we should naturally expect resistance. And when we have resistance, it's a good thing. I never heard about it before I attended the course. I thought always resistance is bad. I thought resistance is something that we need to fight. We need to convince people, and those people who resist, they don't know what they're talking about. I used to see them as, almost like enemies at workplace. This guy is against CI. Why doesn't he or she get CI? Why are they, resisting so much? Why are they criticizing me so much? I used to take it personally also. Later I learned, not to take things personally as well. So what I found was that we should surface resistance proactively, whether, it is in work life or in personal life. When we are trying to do something out of the ordinary, when we are trying to improve something, we should expect resistance. And if there is no resistance, then that means either the resistance has gone underground, right, which has gone into covert stage, or people have not understood the why. What is this change? What is this? How is this going to affect me? People have not understood what you're talking about. So when we explain things, we should naturally expect resistance, and resistance helps in improving, whatever we are trying to implement, whether it is like a ERP implementation, or, lean six sigma, or a transformation project, digital transformation, anything that we are trying to do. If people are resisting, or if people are expressing concerns, it's a good thing. That's what I have learned over the years.
Yeah, at least then they're open and they're talking to you about it, which is important.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
how do you deal with the person who says, like Bill, I've been
Mhm.
involved in continuous improvement, and maybe they really have, but you're
Mhm.
talking about change, but in reality,
Mhm.
what we have is working, and I'm not
Mhm.
convinced that changing it is really going to make a
Mhm.
difference. And
Mhm.
how do you deal with that?
Yep. Again, over the years, I have so many stories. This story, again, is from of the organizations I have worked in. Yeah, this particular person was saying the same thing. It was one of the Tetra Pak manufacturing lines. You may have seen the Tetra Pak, right? So the Tetra Pak where juice is packed, or milk is packed, or any
Right,
beverage is packed, right?
right.
So these Tetra Paks, when they were producing those Tetra Paks of juice, they had an issue of the juice packs being either overweight or underweight. So they had this continuous issue on the line, not just one line, but I think three or four of the lines. So consistently, it would be either overweight or underweight. And if you're having the overweight or underweight, you would be audited, and you would get into all
Yeah.
sorts of trouble. And moreover, you're losing money if the pack is overweight. And if the pack is underweight, somebody can file a claim. Customer complaints would increase. So this particular line manager, he said, he was avoiding me, and I know that he would avoid me. But he, at that point of time, he had no choice. So he said, Khwaja, I have a few ideas. I don't, before, you come and tell me, continuous improvement, blah blah blah. I have a few ideas. I want to test them. And he gave me the his thought process. And he wanted to try that. before he agreed to listen to me. So I said, Bob, I'm all for it. Please go ahead, and let's see whether what you're trying to do works or not. So basically, in our language, what we call it as an experiment, in continuous improvement terminology, we call it as an experiment. He was trying to do an experiment with one factor at a time, meaning that he would try to change one variable, and he would try to see whether that has any impact on the overfilled packs or underfilled packs. So he wanted to change one variable at a time, and there were 3 4 variables at that time which he thought were suspects. So he wanted to change those variables and see what the impact would be. So I told him, Bob, yeah, let's try that. And I told him, very politely, if that doesn't work, would you be willing to try what I am asking you to do, because I have an idea also. He said, yeah, let's do that. So I worked with him. I worked with him on the line, with his supervisors also. And he tried, one factor at a time. He trained, he changed this, he changed that. It didn't work. So reluctantly, but then the good thing was he was open-minded also. Reluctantly, he said, "Okay, Khwaja, come, let's sit in my office and let's talk." So I told him about a concept called design of experiments, DOE. In that, using that methodology, um, you can basically have 3 4 factors which you can vary them simultaneously, and then see the impact on overpacking and underpacking. So when I explained to him, when I taught him about the concept, him and his supervisors and the line operators, he said, "Yeah, let's try. Let's see if this works." And at the end of the day, we were both trying to improve the process. We were both trying to get rid of this problem.
Sure.
So we did the DOE, and then it worked. Within a few days, the problem got resolved. So what I learned from that is, sometimes you need to let people hit the wall before you offer them a solution. So that's something that I have learned. But of course, in this case, it was not such a costly mistake. It was not like a disaster, but it was a controlled disaster.
So what
You
was the
Yeah.
actual change? What change was made that fixed the problem, or what was your idea that fixed the problem? Because he was
So
changing
it
one
was to
variable at a time, but that wasn't
one
fixing it.
variable at a time. Yep. So we had to do the root cause analysis, and through the root cause analysis, whatever variables that he was going after were not the root causes, because he was
Ah,
not using a structured methodology.
okay.
When we used the structured methodology, we went into root cause analysis. We did a structured, like a fishbone diagram. I don't want to go into
Yeah,
the technical
yeah.
details, but we did the in-depth root cause analysis, and then we did something called as a design of experiment, where we chose 3 factors and we varied it simultaneously. So it is a controlled experiment which we did, and immediately, it's not that you would do that and you would get result 1 month later. You would get results immediately. You would see the result immediately when you do that experiment. Versus what he did, it involved a certain bit of time. It would take 1 week for us to see a change.
Hmm.
So when I showed him this and this versus this, he was really impressed. And from that day onwards, he became a huge supporter of CI. In fact, the plant in which I was working in, with the support of one of the plant managers, Tim, his name, I'm still in touch with him, and we share thoughts with each other. I see him as a huge mentor also. We got Plant of the Year award for a plant that was about to be shut down back in 2009. So that's how we were able to get the buy-in from all the line managers, and get started on the continuous improvement journey, because the management had told that if you don't improve within a few months, you would be shut down. So
Hmm.
we all worked together and we did experiments like this, and we were able to turn around a plant. Of course, not just me. So I just played one small role in that. We did as a team. It was a team effort.
And that's
Mhm.
how you really overcome resistance to change, when people see that you bring something to the table that works, then they're
Yep.
probably more apt to want to listen to you.
Yep. Indeed. We need to know what we are talking about. That builds trust, definitely.
Yeah. And the issue is that what you're talking about is in a sense different than what they understand, and it's a matter of
Mhm.
establishing credibility.
Yes,
which is
indeed.
which is pretty cool.
Yep.
Well, so tell me about your books. You've written two books, and
Yeah.
you've written INSPIRE, and
hmm
you've written another book. Tell us about those.
Yes. So, uh, I have always wanted to share my knowledge, and I have always been sharing my knowledge, through training, through coaching. I have conducted so many training sessions, so many, and I have learned also, from shop floor employees, frontline employees, from middle managers. I have learned so much from them, and also executives, top executives, leaders from various industries. Whether it is manufacturing or logistics or back offices, banking, pure manufacturing or logistics, container shipping business, or aluminum rolling business. So I wanted to write this book to share my knowledge, because when I see that change management or change is being implemented very poorly, that really frustrates me. So I wanted to share this, and I have seen numerous books being written on this, numerous frameworks also, you name it. There are so many books out there. What I wanted to do is give a simple framework, which is INSPIRE, which is, if you have to implement change, you need to inspire employees. There are no two ways about it. If we can talk about logic, we can talk about change management, we can talk about what's in it for me, everything. But in my experience, if if any employee or if any individual is not inspired by the change is not going to go anywhere. They may do out of compliance, but we will not really get their hearts in it. And that's why I came up with this framework called Inspire, which is I basically is inspire the need for change in employees. N is navigate the organization and build a coalition. N stands for that. S is to surface resistance proactively, meaning, as we discussed, don't wait for resistance to hit you, when you least expect it, and then the change goes nowhere. Surface resistance proactively. And P is plan your implementation. When I say plan, not just like a 20-step bullet point. There are so many plans that need to come together, like a communication plan, resistance management plan, a training plan. There are so many plans that need to work together. And again, depending on the complexity of the change, I never advocate overcomplicating stuff. And then you have I, which is implementation. When this is where rubber meets the road. If we don't implement the change in a structured way, leaders are not role modeling on the shop floor. Leaders are just, we call it as EMR. And this is again from another framework called AIM, AIM. Uh, you know, Basically what we mean here is, you can express leaders can express about the change, role model the change, and reinforce the change, EMR. So if leaders are just expressing the change, it will lead to one times the improvement. But if leaders are role modeling the change, it will lead to three times the change, acceleration. And if leaders are reinforcing the change, it will lead to 10 times accelerating the change. So that's what I talk about in terms of implementation, experimentation and stuff, which is I. And then you have reinforce and sustain, which is R. And then E stands for evaluating and learning. After we close a change initiative, after we signed off on a change initiative, what have we learned from it? What have we learned from it? And what if we had a chance to make a do-over, what would we do differently? What have we learned from it, and what would we do differently? And if we were to implement another change, what are the learnings that we can take from this change that we have implemented and apply the learnings in our next change? And also, when leadership transitions, many changes, what happens, and this is what I have experienced, and this frustrates me a lot as well, is when leadership changes, the change gets messed up. I want to say fucked up, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
You just
But
did.
every leader, every leader wants to come in and right or wrong. I'm not blaming a leader, wants to leave their mark in the organization, which is good. But uh, what they inadvertently do is undo the change which their predecessors have done, and then people get confused.
Yeah.
They say it as a flavor of the month, or they say, okay, let's wait until this leader moves on, so that we can just wait until this change passes away. And it leads to reduction of morale and lots of issues. So this is what I talk about in my book as well, how to avoid these situations. So it's like a practical framework where which anybody can take and apply it to any change of any complexity. And even if it is very very simple change which is going to take maybe 10 days or 5 days only, they can quickly go through the inspire framework and see what are the gaps, and whether we are implementing the change in a proper structured way. And this is just a framework, and we don't have to use all the tools that I have mentioned in the book. We can
Mm.
pick and choose the tools which are relevant for the change that we are trying to implement.
What is the key to making change sustainable when maybe leadership changes or the company environment
Mhm.
shifts?
Yes. So, as Dr. Deming said, constancy of purpose. Right. So if I'm a leader, Mike, and if I'm changing my role, and if I'm going to another function or another department, whether in the same organization or in a different organization, and let's say that Mike, you are taking over my role, what is the constancy of purpose? Are we does the organization, it starts from our organization level, does the organization have a constancy of purpose, and is it aligned with the vision and mission? And whatever I have, whatever changes I have implemented, have I communicated them to you? Is there a smooth handover between me and you, so that you understand what are the changes I have done, what are the improvements I have done, and how you can take it forward and continuously improve upon it. So one thing is completely undoing, and the other thing is continuously improving upon it, so that
Mhm.
people see it as a natural continuous improvement, rather than abruptly undoing something, and then starting from scratch and saying that, oh, no, 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 whatever this person did is total crap, and now we are going to change or revolutionize the whole organization, which 9 out of 10 times is you're just rehashing what this person has done into something new, into a different framework or a different bottle, however you want to frame it. So there has to be a smooth handover. So that's point number one. And point number two is the employees, the middle managers have the middle managers and the whole leadership team. They have an obligation. They have a accountability to make sure that they are aligned, to make sure that if one of their leadership team members is moving on, whenever a new leadership team member comes on board, to onboard them in a structured way, not to leave them hanging, not to not to let that person implement his or her own way completely. Let onboard them and let them know what has happened in the organization, how they can continuously improve upon it. I'm not saying that a revolutionary change is not required. All I'm saying that there are times when a revolution is required, but most of the times continuous improvement is good enough. When we continuously improve, it keeps the continuity going, and people don't see it as change after change after change. We don't induce change fatigue in the organizations if we
Right.
if we do it as a continuum.
Makes sense. And
Mhm.
it's all about communication.
Yep, indeed, and that's why that's why I have written my second book, which is about active listening. Um, you know, uh, I'm a bad listener. I have to be honest. So I used to be a very, very bad listener. Now I'm just a bad listener. So I have continuously improved on my listening skills, and at least I know now that I'm aware of my how I need to improve my listening skills. So over the years, I have learned the techniques of how to listen, and when I say listen, it is not to many people, many of us, even now also sometimes I catch myself trying to listen to reply or listen to respond. So when I catch myself doing that, I consciously try to listen to the person. So again, in this book I have shared the techniques which would help anybody to become a better listener, which one of the requirements for being a great leader. How to listen to people, and how to listen to people, truly listen to people. So I talk about simple techniques in the book. For example, paraphrasing, remembering, listening without judgment, right, or suspending judgment, as I say. So I rank these techniques in increasing order of complexity. Suspending judgment being the most difficult. When someone starts speaking, or even when we see someone, immediately in the first 5 seconds we judge that person.
Yeah.
And right or wrong, we judge that. And in this book also I talk about why we are prone to judging people, and why we have such a difficult time in suspending judgment. So if we are aware that let's say that when I'm talking to you, Mike, if I catch myself judging you, right, so at least I know that I'm judging you, right? So at least I know that I'm judging you, and I should not do that. I should listen to you, and I should try to understand where you're coming from, instead of just thinking in my mind, oh, whatever Mike is saying, is it doesn't make any sense. So maybe initially it may not make sense, but when we open our ears, we have two ears, and that's for a reason, and only one mouth. So we need to listen, and we need to completely understand where the other person is coming from, whether it is in personal life or in work life. When we if we don't listen to the teams whom we are managing, and if we just say, do as I say, it's my way or the highway, people will do, because you are their line manager, but it won't last long.
No.
The minute change your team, or the minute you go out, people will be good riddance. So that's what they would be thinking. So how to listen to people, and also it will help the leader to grow. Over the years, when I listen to my wife, I have understood my own shortcomings. And if I had listened to her 20 years back, maybe I would have been a different person. Maybe I would have been a more mature person. So this is what I talk about in the book as well. How can we truly listen? And some techniques like paraphrasing, when our mind wanders, it will be good to paraphrase the person to whom you're speaking, so that you remember. So remembering, paraphrasing, empathy, for example, not just talking about KPIs to the team members. Understand how they're doing. Are they having any personal issues? How is their family? Work is not, what work is a part of our life, but we spend 8 to 10 hours at a workplace. So we need to know the team members whom we are managing, and we need to listen to them. If somebody is performing badly, right, it's very easy to give them a negative feedback. But if we listen to them, and if they feel heard, maybe they're going through something, or maybe they're not getting enough support. If we listen to them, and if we create that environment of active listening in the whole team, suspending judgment and listening actively, then we create a more stronger bond, and the team would become like a world class team. This has been my experience. So this is what I have shared in my second book.
And certainly words to remember. Well, we have been doing this an hour now, and I think it's probably time that we end it for the day. But if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, I am there on LinkedIn, and people can reach me through email, and I'll be more than happy to
Okay.
respond to anything they need. And if people want to reach out to me to conduct any training sessions, my website is also there, Journey Towards Excellence, where I have my offerings. And
So
in
so what is
general,
the
if
so
people
what is
like
the
to talk
website?
to me,
What is the website called again?
journeytowardsexcellence.com.
Journeytowardsexcellence.com. Okay. And your
Yep.
email
Yep.
address?
Khwaja.moinuddin@gmail.com.
And spell that if you would, please.
Yes, please. Khwaja dot Moinuddin @gmail.com.
Great. Well, I hope people will reach out. I think you've offered a lot of great insights and inspiration for people. I appreciate hearing all that you've had to say, and I knew I was going to learn a lot today, and have. And I always tell people if I'm not learning at least as much as everyone else, I'm not doing my job right. So I really appreciate your time. And it's now getting late where you are, so we're going to let you go. But I want to thank you again for being here, and I do want to thank everyone who is listening and watching us today. We really appreciate it. If you would, I'd love it if you'd give us a 5-star review wherever you're watching us and listening to us. If you'd like to talk to me or email me about the episode and give us your thoughts, feel free to do so at Michael H.I., Michaelhi, at accessibe, accessibe.com, or go to our podcast page, Michael Hingson, that's michaelhingson.com/podcast. Love to hear from you. If any of you have any thoughts as to someone else who might make a good podcast guest, and Khwaja, you as well, would love it if you'd
Yep.
let us know. We're always looking for more people to come on and be guests on the show. But again, Khwaja, I want to thank you for being here. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And it's an honor to be part of your podcast. I wish I had met you earlier and learned, I would have learned so much from you. I would definitely, reach out to you to learn more. And, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you definitely for the opportunity.